Welcome to the sixth presentation, the Nutritional Nugget webinar presentation in this Wealth in Health series. So, as you can see, vitamin D is what we're talking about today. And let's get the housekeeping out of the way. Like always, if you have any questions, if you would be so kind to give me your feedback, if you wanted to connect back to me, let me know how you felt. Let me know what you thought on my presentation. Please reach back on the platforms that we have available to us. And this presentation is another deep one, quite a deep dive. And like always, I find a topic or topics, a theme, a condition, and I talk about it. And I relate it back to food, vitamins, minerals, nutritional guidance, not cure. That must be made always crystal clear. And at the end of this presentation, what you'll find is a page full of citations. So there is some studies here. As hopefully you know by now, I'm evidence-based. So everything that I do put out on these presentations, they need to be backed by some form of science. If not science, then a case study, a personal case study, and hopefully something that you could nod your head to and say, okay, I like that. In we go. What we're trying to do with all of these presentations are embody the 4 pillars of health so that we can ultimately create wealth within the health. And for those that are already on my programs, packages, platforms, you will know there is a current running theme with me, and that is the 4 pillars of health to create the wealth within the health. 4 pillars being self-care, self-love, nutrition, and movement. Vitamin D, what is it? So it's known as the sunshine vitamin. Vitamin D is produced by the body in response to the skin being exposed to sunlight. So I'm trying to break it down basic. Simplify maths. It also occurs naturally in a few foods, including some fish liver oils, egg yolks, and in fortified dairy and grain products. And just before I continue, like always, there's always going to be overlap. So you may have seen the previous presentation that was on insomnia. This particular presentation will also be mentioning a few of the products that were mentioned in that presentation as well. Vitamin D occurs in nature in 2 main forms. So vitamin D2, and that's pronounced as ego-calciferol, which is photochemically synthesized in plants. Now, what photochemically means is the reaction caused by the chemical action of light. That's basically what it is. Vitamin D3, polycalciferol, this is synthesized within the skin after exposure to sunlight, in particularly ultraviolet B radiation at any appropriate wavelength of 280 to 320 nanomillimoles. Again, that's cited. Everything that I write down here is cited. So I'm adding a bit more, what is it? And I'm adding a little bit of geekiness. This is important because of the further slides coming up. So the classical synthetic vitamin D pathway involves sequential 25 hydroxylation, and that is 25 in brackets OHD and 1 hydroxylation, and you can read the 1.25 O2D of vitamin D2 and D3 precursors in the liver and kidney, respectively. That will make more sense on future slides. Vitamin D metabolites circulate in the bloodstream as bound to the vitamin D binding protein, DBP. Now, vitamin D made in the skin or ingested in the diet is biologically inert and requires 2 successive hydroxylations, first in the liver on carbon 25 to form 25 hydroxyvitamin D, which is 25 OHD, and then in the kidney for a hydroxylation on carbon 1 to form the biologically active form of vitamin D, the 1.25 dehydroxyvitamin D, which is 1.25 OH2D. Hopefully now that gives a little bit of light onto what these abbreviations are. So you don't need to know them. With the identification of 25 OHD and 1.25 OH2D, methods were developed to measure these metabolites in the circulation. So that's what they're looking for whenever vitamin D2 and D3 gets measured. Where can we get it from? I'm going to guide your eyes to the left-hand side, and I'm just going to read the first bit. This image, number 4, shows a pathway how vitamin D can metabolize in our body through sunlight and through the ingestion of certain foods and supplements. This begs the question, hormone or nutrient? So now take a look on the right-hand side, and you see the sunlight pierces through the skin. Then you've got the 7-dehydrocholesterol, which then converts into cholecalciferol, which is vitamin D3, that goes into the liver, and then out of the liver, you've got that 25 marker that we explained on the previous slide. Then you look to the right of the liver, and you'll see dietary intake. So not only does the sun give you the same vitamin D3, but also dietary intake. And you'll see supplements, and I'll get into that a little bit later. So let's focus on the left and go back up again. This begs the question, hormone or nutrient? It's both. We're made up of chemicals. So hopefully that makes a little bit of understanding with the sun piercing, and then it gives you that chemical. And then you can eat something and it comes in. So through nutrients. We are made up of chemicals, which might make you stop and think next time you shun a food because you think it's got chemicals in it. We are just pure chemical. So don't look at a food and say that's full of chemicals, because you're full of chemicals. Anyway, there is a chemical conversion in the body that transforms the vitamins into a hormone. The hormone can bind its nuclear receptor sequencing an orchestra of hormonal effects. So you see now, if you look at the right-hand side again, and just below the liver, where it says 25 hydroxyvitamin D3, look at the kidney, and then you can see the arrow pointing at the 1.25 dehydroxyvitamin D3, and that maintains calcium balance in the body. So you can see how the effects of hormones and nutrients can be sequenced, as it's explained, like an orchestra of hormonal effects. Vitamin D and neurological diseases. So now we're going into some conditions, just like we have on previous presentations. Why vitamin D is necessary for brain health. Many forms of studies have been done on vitamin D, but this image is taken from a study that used the vivo and in vitro methods of test. So in vivo is Latin for within the living. It refers to the work that is performed in a whole living organism. In vitro is Latin for within the glass. When something is performed in vitro, it happens outside of a living organism. If you think of IVF treatment, that's in vitro. Multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's disease, along that circle, if we're now going clockwise. Parkinson's disease, dementia, neurocognitive disorders, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. And then within that, we've got the immune regulation, amyloid clearance, protein aggregates, neuronal transmission, mitochondrial dysfunction, neurotrophin dysfunction, oxidative stress, calcium imbalance, which basically means unbalanced vitamin D homeostasis. Homeostasis is the body's balance. And this is where vitamin D can really play a role into the body's homeostasis. Accumulating evidence suggests that vitamin D acts as a neurosteroid. A neurosteroid refers to steroids synthesized in the brain and is required for normal brain development and function. The steroids can be synthesized in the brain or by an endocrine gland, which is what helps the steroid reach and get through the blood-brain barrier, which is essential for cognitive health. Now, if you travel back to probably the first presentation that I did, spoke a little bit about the blood-brain barrier there and what you need to break that down. That's normally fats, but with a combination of vitamins and minerals, that could also be the pathway towards breaking through the blood-brain barrier. The association between low levels of 25-OHD and a wide spectrum of neurodegenerative conditions such as multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and neurocognitive disorders are supported by the in vitro and in vivo data. So if you look back to the previous slide, you will see these disorders in that circle, and it should hopefully start to make sense and connect. We're moving on to good sources of vitamin D. Now, explaining this, depending on the country that you are in, we are in the UK, so taking that on board, from about late March, early April to the end of September, most people should be able to get all the vitamin D they need from sunlight. The body creates vitamin D from direct sunlight on the skin when outdoors. But between October and early March, we do not get enough vitamin D from sunlight. Vitamin D is also found in a small number of foods. Sources include oily fish. Now, that's always been a big one in all of my presentations because of the DHA and the EPA, such as salmon, sardines, herring, and mackerel, red meat, liver, egg yolks, fortified foods such as some fat spreads and breakfast cereals. Another source of vitamin D is dietary supplements. In the UK, cow's milk is generally not a good source of vitamin D because it is not fortified as it is in other countries. And I've written a citation down there for that. Okay, so let's get specific. We're in the UK, as I've mentioned. We don't get much sun, let's face it. And even if it's a scorcher, we're probably going to leather the sunscreen on, and then there's a minimal chance the skin will absorb the vitamin D. So, where from and how much? The amount of vitamin D you need each day depends on your age. Average daily recommended amounts are listed below in micrograms, mcg, and international units that you may see in some of the vitamins that you buy, which are IU. Now, life stage recommended amounts. We've got the birth to 12 months. Requirements are around 10 micrograms, which is 400 IU. Children between 1 and 13 years of age require 15 micrograms, which is 600 IU. Teenagers 14 to 18 years of age require 15 micrograms, and that is 600 IU. Adults 19 to 70 years, so the full-on adult spectrum, 15 micrograms, 600 IU, just like the teens. Adults that are 71 years and older, we're going to up it to 20 micrograms, 800 IU. If you're pregnant and breastfeeding, if you're a teen, if you're a woman, 15 micrograms, 600 IUs is recommended. Salmon per 100 grams farmed, which is approximately 250 IU of vitamin D in that. Salmon per 100 grams wild, approximately 988 IUs. Now that, looking at the difference between the farmed and the wild, would give you a light bulb moment, I'm sure. Other fatty fish such as herring, pilchards, sardines, halibut, you're looking between 216 to 316 IU respectively of their 100 grams. Cod liver oil contains 448 IUs of vitamin D per teaspoon, which is around 4.9 mil. You can round it up to 5, or 56% of the daily value. It is also high in other nutrients such as vitamin A and omega-3 fatty acids. Eggs. From commercially raised hens, they contain only about 37 IU of vitamin D per yolk. Eggs from hens raised outside or fed vitamin D enriched feed contain much higher levels. Foods such as cow's milk, soy milk, orange juice, cereals, and porridge oats are sometimes fortified with vitamin D. These contain 54 to 136 IUs per serving. Your body needs vitamin D to absorb calcium. This makes getting enough of both vitamin D and calcium crucial to maintaining bone health and preventing osteoporosis. Adults ages 19 to 50 generally require about 2,500 milligrams daily, which decreases to 2,000 milligrams daily for those over 50. And again, that's all cited. What levels of vitamin D intakes are associated with adverse effects? So we know that if something is real good, there's got to be a counter to that. And most studies do not report adverse effects with vitamin D supplementation, which is all good. However, one study showed an increased risk of kidney stones with supplemental intakes of 400 IU vitamin D3, along with 1,000 milligrams calcium, each day in women aged 50 to 79 years. That was cited. This study was not a publication I could retrieve. So I'm just citing that, but I wasn't allowed to pull it up, probably because it needs further investigation. I further researched and found only one research paper that found an adverse effect on the kidneys through vitamin D supplementation. The 56-year-old gentleman in question had 70% function on his kidneys before the prescription of vitamin D3, so already there was an issue. He took between 8,000 to 10,000 IUs of vitamin D a day. The time on the dosage was not made clear, but the gentleman in question went down to 30% kidney function and almost required dialysis. The case was in Toronto, Canada. Now, like everything, if you have underlying health conditions, then the studies are going to be thrown out a little in their results. So this particular research paper, one that was found through probably millions that have been done of positive effects of vitamin D, people can pull this out and say, right, this happened. And then it goes in the news, for example, it becomes viral, and then you think, too much vitamin D, there's an issue, let's stay away from vitamin D. It's not the case here, really isn't the case. And that's why research is so important, because you've got to look real deep sometimes. You've got to look in the weeds. And looking at this, you could see the gentleman in question had an issue in the first place. And he was given quite a dose, but again, just things didn't add up in the study. That was enough to say, right, stamp approval, vitamin D is poor. Some things to look out for. Early symptoms are loss of appetite, nausea and vomiting, followed by excessive thirst, weakness, nervousness, and high blood pressure. Because the calcium level is high, calcium may be deposited throughout the body, particularly in the kidneys, blood vessels, lungs, and heart. The kidneys may be permanently damaged and malfunction could occur, resulting in kidney failure. Some studies suggest that intakes up to 10,000 IU a day have not been associated with adverse effects. If you take more than 10,000 IU per day of vitamin D orally for more than 6 months, you are definitely at risk of becoming vitamin D intoxicated. And remember, we cannot become vitamin D intoxicated from excessive sunlight. So there's always that. Summary and some extra bits. Right. Now, during the winter, very little UVB reaches us, and thus less cholesterol is used to synthesize vitamin D in the body. This is one of the reasons blood cholesterol levels may be higher during the winter months. Serum 25-OHD is the best indicator of vitamin D status. A classic sign of vitamin D deficiency is the isolated and generalized muscle and bone pain. People with dark skin may require 5 to 10 times the amount of sun exposure to produce adequate vitamin D compared to someone with light skin pigmentation. Spending time in the sun is a good way to get your daily dose of vitamin D. However, sufficient sun exposure is difficult for many people to achieve. Eating plenty of these vitamin D-rich foods listed in this presentation is a great way to make sure you get enough of this important nutrient. Recommendations for safe daily doses of vitamin D range from 400 to 1,000 IUs per day to up to 2,000 IUs per day. These are the citations that you are more than welcome to freeze frame, copy, paste, do what you can do with them. And like always, any questions, which I hope you deliver back to me on the platforms that we are connected with. I'd like to say thank you once again for your patience. Thank you for being part of this series. And hopefully, I've given you some food for thought.